Hello, everyone. Greetings to you from California. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for our final lecture here, final review lecture, but I hope that this will be a suitable substitute. So, yeah, what I'd like to do basically for this is just quickly go over some review. In particular, we've got 5 things I want to cover. First is just going to be some simple admin, basically reminding you about how you get your grade for this class, uh, to kind of dampen any worries you might have. And then I want to do a quick survey review. I'll talk about all the things that we've covered, with obviously a particular focus on the second half of the course, where we spent most of the time in the last few weeks. And then we'll pivot to a little more practicalities, talk about very specific things that you need to know for the exam preparation. So that'll be section 3. And we'll kind of wrap up by talking about some interesting ways you can kind of extend your studies if you're interested in any of the kind of formal tools that we've looked at in this class. So that's the plan. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing is obviously about admin. And this is just a kind of reminder about how your grade is determined. Right? Remember, I don't really care where the points come from, but you've got 100 possible points. So there's a maximum of 20 points for the homework, and here I'm going to take your best 10 scores, so you have wiggle room if you want to skip a few. Then you score out of 40 for the midterm. I mean, technically 42, right? But we don't tell anybody about the secret bonus points. And then there'll be something very similar for the final exam. It'll be out of a 40 with maybe, we'll see, a bonus question. I'm not sure. So what I'm going to do is take your point total, I'll divide the scores up, add them up, divide by 10, and then round to the nearest 0.5, and that will be your grade. The thing to remember is that a passing grade requires 55 points or more. And again, I do not care where the points come from, right? So you can do 40 out of 40 on the final, get a 10 on the midterm, do your homework, and you've done very well, right? So very flexible here. With regards to the structure of the final exam, so it's going to be worth 40 points, unsurprisingly, and there's going to be 8 open questions. Each question is going to be worth 5 points. And these are going to be very similar to the assignments we've been doing for the back half of the course. In particular, there's going to be one question that's going to be some set theory exercises, so similar to exercise B from the set theory worksheet. There'll also be a question where I ask you for some definitions, distinctions. Again, these can be done in a sentence or two. And then the short answer essay questions, these will usually take maybe 2 paragraphs, maybe even less, depending on how exactly concisely you write and how narrow you can focus. What I'm really looking for here is again, that we're getting the main ideas, that we're able to express them in our own words and understand how this dialectic kind of goes. Notably, everything is on the study guide already, which is on Canvas, so you've got lots of tools to be able to figure out how this all works. So that's the exam. What I thought I would do next is talk about kind of what we've done, right? Because honestly, it's really impressive what we've covered. So the first 7 weeks, we went through what you could call the syntax and model theory for 2 formal languages, right? Truth functional logic and first order logic. And between friends, it's worth noting that what we did there is, in many places, what they do over the whole semester. So you should really be proud of yourself for how well you did and how quickly everything went for us. And then what we did in the second half of the course is we talked about related questions in philosophy of logic, philosophy of language, and analytic metaphysics, kind of building on and extending some of the formal stuff we did in the first half. So yeah, I guess the big thing here is really to say, you should be proud of yourselves. You've done really well, and it's excellent we've gotten this far. Especially, I mean, the first half stuff's hard. It can be really hard. So nice job, really nice job. And the kind of aim of what we've been doing, right? The first half was really designed to familiarize you with the formal machinery. I wanted to teach you the formal tools. And the second half of the course, that we've been doing for the past 7 or 8 weeks, has been thinking about something like the philosophical underpinnings of this machinery. And this broadly kind of divides into 2 tasks. So one of them is sort of extending or applying the formal tools, and then the other half is discussing some, we'll call them philosophical upshots. So in particular, the last 3 weeks have really been about these sort of philosophical upshots. We think about properties, we think about reference, and we think about the nature of identity. In contrast, weeks 8, 9, and 10 were much more about kind of extending our formal tools or applying them. So ontological commitment, set theory, and possible worlds are ways to either apply or extend the formal systems we've already got. And obviously this back half, we've been really focused on FOL, right? That's because it is effectively what philosophers think of as classical logic. Most philosophers, when they think of doing logic, are thinking about doing something in something like FOL. And FOL obviously has pretty significant philosophical import and a massive range of applications, so that's why we spent so long thinking about it. The first kind of application we talked about was, of course, a theory's commitments, understanding the notion of ontological commitments. And following Quine, we understood the ontological commitments as the things that a theory quantifies over. Or put another way, what has to be in the domain for the theory's sentences to be true. And on the flip side to the ontological commitments, we had this sort of ideological commitments. Which are those predicates the theory takes to be fundamental or kind of not explicable in terms of other predicates. And we talked about this trade-off, this dance between minimizing ontology and increasing ideology, or vice versa. And indeed, this was a theme that came up several times. And notably, using FOL was essential here because it was, according to Quine, the only way to spell out ontological commitments, Ontological commitment just is, according to Quine, being quantified over with the existential. So that was our first kind of thing. Then the next 2 weeks, what we did is we expanded our formal toolkit. So first we did some set theory things, which helps us to kind of understand maybe what the meaning of a predicate is. So maybe it's a set, And also just gave us another formal tool that we can use more generally. And then after that, I guess it was week 9 or 10, we talked about possible world semantics. So this was a way for us to understand possibility and necessity claims, which FOL isn't structured to do. And we did this by extending FOL, adding our 2 modal operators, Our box for necessity and our diamond for possibility. And possible world semantics gave us a way to understand how these work, When are they true and when are they false? So this was, again, kind of extending our formal toolkit, giving ourselves more capacity or formal systems to be able to do things with. And then after that, we pivoted. And the last 3 weeks of this half have been thinking about fundamental aspects of FOL. So we started by talking about properties, Thinking about the meanings of predicates and what predicates might refer to if they refer at all. And here we looked at the 3 arguments for the existence of properties, and we thought about some different metaphysical accounts of what properties might be. Then we pivoted to thinking about not in terms of predicates, but terms, singular terms. How do singular terms denote or refer to the things that they do? And what is their meaning, if there is any such thing? And here we looked at 2 accounts, The direct reference theory and descriptivism. And we said some good things about them and some bad things about them, and that was sort of where we were. And then we wrapped up by talking about identity. So a very particular kind of predicate that came up in FOL, and we were here worried about kind of relationship between identity and similarity, and also the modal status of identity. If an identity is true, is it necessarily true, or could it be merely contingent? And it's notable that here, and much like with everything we've talked about in the second half, the aim wasn't necessarily to resolve these issues, but what we really wanted to do was to try and highlight some of the philosophical underpinnings or philosophical choice points you could have that's lurking behind the formal machinery. In this way, I hope that you can see the second half of the course was a kind of complement to the formal work that we did in the first 7 weeks. So that's the review. You might, of course, be wondering about slightly more pragmatic concerns, that is, how you prepare for the exam. So the biggest thing to note about this is the exam questions are going to be very similar to the questions in the homework assignments. And that is, they're going to have the same kind of length, same focus, Again, broadly, you can answer them in a paragraph or two. Notably, I've now uploaded sample answers. You can see those on the Canvas page, so you can find them there if you're looking to sort of compare and contrast, see the kind of thing I'm really looking for. And then, of course, you might wonder, right, cool, so I know what sort of questions there are, but what kind of things are they going to be about? Now, notably, we broadly covered roughly 2 topics per lecture, so we can quickly kind of go through those. Right? With regards to our first one, this sort of ontological commitment lecture, one big topic we talked about was Quine's method, right? The idea of the 3 steps, right? And then how we can use this method for catching ontological cheaters. So that was one topic. And the second topic was something about the method of paraphrase. So what is it? What is it meant to help us do? Can we think of examples? Right? And how does this relate back then to this dance between maximizing or minimizing ontology and doing the opposite for ideology? So that's kind of questions or areas that I might ask you about. When it comes to set theory, the big things here are really just telling me about the set theoretic operations, right? I'll give you some sets and ask for you to give me their union, tell me their intersection, give me the difference between them, and talk about how we could formulate a power set of them. Notably, we didn't really get to talk about the properties of relations, so I'm not going to ask you any questions about these. Then for our third one, right, we talked about possible worlds, and the big things here are going to be the semantics, possible world semantics. So what does it mean to say it's relational, right, that the worlds see each other, right? And what the hell are worlds meant to be? So sort of relational semantics, the Leibnizian biconditionals that define the truth conditions for the box and diamond operator, and this notion of an accessibility relation, like how the worlds see or access each other. That's one topic. And then the second topic was really modal realism, right? What does the modal realist believe? What's the kind of upshot for their view? What problems do they have, right? What did Lewis want to say? World, giant, concrete things, etc., etc., etc. So these are the kinds of things I can ask you a question about, right? Then on the last 3 lectures, so first in the properties one, we had the 3 arguments for the existence of properties, why we ought to believe in them. And then we had a slew of options with regards to the metaphysics here. So we have kind of realists who say properties are universals, and then there's a debate about what universals are, and we have nominalists who say, right, some of them say properties exist, others of them say they don't, but importantly, both of them agree whatever properties are, if they are, they're not universals. So those are 2 areas. With regards to reference, it splits quite nicely, right? There's the direct reference theory and its various problems, and there's descriptivism and its various problems. So, expect a question maybe on one or the other. And then finally, for identity, it's very clear what the split is. There's a discussion about the relationship between identity and similarity, exemplified by questions about the identity of indiscernibles principle, right? And then also this debate we had centering around the Lumpel and Goliath case, but the necessity of the apparent contingency of identity. So again, these are the kind of 2 things we want. Now, notably, in all of these, what we'll try and do is always focus on things that we talked about, not try and do, in fact, we'll guarantee, have to be things we talked about, and it'll have to be things on the study guide. I will not ask you anything that is not on the study guide. That just seems fair. I think otherwise it's just rude. The big thing with regards to preparing for the exam is just do your best, but don't stress out, right? It is just a logic exam. I want you to do very well, and I'm already very, very proud of all of you guys. But, it's okay if it doesn't go perfectly. Right? It's going to be fine. So that's really it for pragmatic stuff. Obviously, if you have any questions about the pragmatics or anything about the exams, feel free to email me, message me on Canvas. I'm away from Tilburg at the moment, but I will be still responding to emails and things as quickly as I can. So what I'd like to do, just to kind of wrap up, is talk about where we might go from here. So what I mean by this is that we've covered a lot of ground, but of course all of this is really sort of introductory. there's so much more that we can do and say and talk about. So I want to just gesture at some things. In particular, I want to focus actually on the formal stuff that we did in the first half. Now, it's notable that throughout the semester, but especially the first 7 weeks, we were operating under some assumptions. In fact, we made these explicit, I believe can't remember if it's lecture 1 or lecture 2. But one assumption we had was that there's no truth value gaps. That is, for every sentence, either it's true or it's false. Right? Either it's true or its negation's true. Right? And this is basically the law of excluded middle. We also worked with an assumption that there are no gluts. That is, for every sentence, it's not the case that it's both true and false. This is the law of non-contradiction. And then finally, we also worked under an assumption that there were only two truth values, right? True and false. There was nothing kind of in the middle. Now, notably, taken together, these three assumptions about how sentences work help characterize classical logic. So these assumptions and the formal machinery we defined up for FOL, that's classical logic. But of course, we could, and perhaps in some cases should, think about giving up on these assumptions. And non-classical logics operate by dropping some or possibly all of these. That is, they modify or give up on some of these assumptions and get radically different semantics or proof systems. So I'm not going to go through all of them. Notably, I'll upload the slides here, and these have links to SEP pages that talk about them. But just for example, intuitionistic logic, which was developed by a Dutch mathematician, right, rejects the law of excluded middle and hence has to do some funny things with how negation works. Or many valued logics reject bivalence. They allow for more truth values. This might be, for example, Ukazowicz gives a three truth valued one where you have true, false, and neither. Now, notably, once you have more than these, you have to go back and rethink your characteristic truth tables. So there's lots of neat ways to extend this. So, again, there's these options, and there might be some circumstances where they're really useful. For example, Lukasowicz's three-value logic is very helpful if we're thinking about beliefs, because it's obviously not the case that people have, they definitely believe P or they definitely believe not P. Sometimes they just don't have a belief about P. So it might be helpful if we want to have, the neither case. So there's going to be different circumstances where we can use slightly modified versions of our formal tools. They'll be more helpful. We've also notably ignored or kind of set aside a huge body of natural language statements that our logical tools just simply can't accept. Here's an easy one. How do we symbolize questions, right? We just simply don't have the tools to capture what a question is, because it's not really the sort of thing that's like true or false. It doesn't really make sense. So there's a couple different ways to go here. Notably, one thing we can do is start adding new non-truth functional operators. And in fact, we've already seen something like this with possible world semantics and understanding modal logic, right? Claims about possibility and necessity. So, along a similar vein, we could do things like temporal logic, where we add tense expressions. So it will rain, it was raining, I'm now hungover, these kinds of things, right? Or we can add non-truth functional operators for deontic logic, that is, claims about how you should or must behave. And similarly for epistemic logic, we can talk about believes or knows, which don't necessarily have any truth functionality to them. And another kind of extension, and these are two areas where I'm particularly interested, we can add non-truth functional operators for things like truth and fiction. That is, we can talk about this funky little f here to use it to say something like, according to fiction blah, P. And this gives us a way to make sense of claims that aren't actually true, but are true within a story. And finally, we have free logic, which is something that's really targeted at some of the empty names puzzles we talked about with direct reference theory. And free logic tries to come up with ways to allow for empty terms. And there's various formulations here, and again, I've got some links if you're interested. They're very cool, very fun, and a lot of fun things to play around with. So what I really want to highlight here with this is that, again, we've been operating under some protective and useful assumptions. But once we're masters of classical logic, we can start to open things up and see what happens if we start to drop these assumptions and play around with slightly different systems. So that's really what I wanted to do. I hope that was interesting, and I do hope if you're at all excited by this formal logic stuff, that you can follow up on some of those links that I've shared, and of course, always feel free to contact me. I'm very happy to talk about this stuff. It's super duper fun. So the last thing to say is basically some goodbyes. Really, what I want to do is thank you guys. Thank you all for participating. I hope you've enjoyed the class and that maybe you've even learned something along the way. I always love teaching this course, and I've had a really, really great time with you all this semester. I'm sorry we couldn't be there in person for our meetings this week. Yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do fill out the evaluation forms. You should be available, I believe, if this video goes up on Thursday, they should be uploaded or available on the Friday. You'll get an email and there'll be an announcement on Canvas about it. Please do fill those out. It's always very helpful. Please be as specific as you can. The more detailed, the better for me to know what worked, what didn't work, how to go from here. I think there isn't a recording survey anymore, so ignore the last line. I guess the last thing I really want to say is again, I've really, really enjoyed teaching this course, and I hope you have enjoyed it. So ending on a good joke, or a joke that I really like. If you didn't like this course, my name is Amanda Costin, and this has been Introduction to Ethics. And if you did like the course, I've obviously been Nathan Twelveman, and this has been Logic. So yeah, thank you guys, and good luck with not just this exam, but all your exams. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all in other semesters and in other circumstances. So yeah, take care, good luck, and yeah, hopefully see you all again soon. Bye.